Well, I wonder what God says about the topic of abortion in the Holy Bible. How does God say life begins? Heather, you've got a Bible text there.
I have, James, in Psalm 139. Yeah. If you look at verse 13 through to about 17, it says that we're actually knit. He created my inmost being. He knit me together in my mother's womb, that we're fearfully and wonderfully made. And I just think that's an incredible description. His eyes saw me before I was formed even.
So the Holy Bible says that God kind of constructed us inside our mother's womb.
Yes.
And I'm sure Warwick would agree, it doesn't kind of say that he waited 6 weeks and then he began working.
No.
Oh, okay. So he began working when the sperm hits the egg.
Yep.
God gets involved.
Well, if you knit, if you're a knitter, you cast on stitches, so you've begun the garment at the very beginning.
At the first stitch?
Yes, and if you drop one, you're in trouble.
Well, that's an interesting way to look at it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I wonder how the Christian Church has actually thought about this topic. I'm going to give you the position of the Christian Church in general at this particular moment in time. Many Protestants don't want to think about it. Those that do, in New Zealand I'm talking about, those that do in America sometimes embarrass us a little bit. The Catholic Church has a very strong position. It says that abortion should result in excommunication. Whether it happens in practice all the time, I don't know, but that it's a very, very serious moral sin. But we've also got Sarah Jane Bishop here. Welcome, Sarah.
Hey, thanks.
And New Testament times, what was the practice?
Yep, the Bible is mostly silent in the New Testament and same again in the Old Testament, but there is Jewish belief around if the mother was at risk, if she continued with the pregnancy, then abortion would happen. And that was because the fetus was seen as putting the mother at risk. So basically, therefore she was obliged.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so in some Jewish families 2,000 years ago, they were wrestling with the same kinds of issues that we wrestle with today. And no doubt they had different conclusions, but that's the story from history, isn't it? Yeah, as in Jewish society, different conclusions, didn't they, Warwick?
Yeah. And also, I think children were seen as a blessing from God, not just, well, it would be nice to have, or they're my right. It was, this is a gift. A special, a precious gift from God.
So
all life was precious.
A Jewish family would never think about this topic in the concept of birth control, more as a thought, man, and then you start the wrestle with God and yourself and life and morals.
Well, as we read through the stories of the Old Testament, we have situations like Hannah's, where she was childless, which was seen as a stain on womanhood. And I mean, that's really sad because, of course, it's many cases it's the man who leads to infertility.
Well, it's amazing how the Christian Church has thought about this particular topic through history. I was quite stunned, actually, as I began to read through history. Did you know that in the Apostolic Constitutions, 380 AD, they said that it was only abortion if the fetus had a shape? So 6 or 7 weeks, I guess. St. Augustine, abortion is okay in early pregnancy as there's no soul yet. 700 AD, what did the church decide? Oral sex. You would have 7 years of penance, leading to a lifetime of penance. Abortion, 120 days of penance. That was an interesting thing. Pope Innocent. Well, he said that the monk whose wife or whose girlfriend aborted their baby, he was guilty of a minor sin, not a major sin, and the penance was over pretty quick. And Luke chapter 1 verse 35 was quoted by the church in that era because they said that thing that was in Mary's womb isn't referring to a human, it's referring to the neuter case. So it was considered somewhat different in the view of the church at that time. And these views have carried through to the church today as well. And that's why within Christendom there are 2 different views about the value of life before birth. And where does that lead us? Leads us to many different views even today. But the text that is often looked at is Exodus chapter 21. It's not in every page of Scripture it talks about this topic, but Exodus 21 at least does address the issue of life before birth. And yes, Sarah, what happened there?
Yep, in this particular part of the Bible, it's talking about the woman, and if she's beaten or injured during pregnancy by someone, then they are to receive a fine. They have to pay a fine. But then if there's further complications from that after the baby's born, or if she has further bleeding or anything like that, then it's actually an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth type of scenario.
So what does that mean? So I'll ask Warwick, actually. So walk us through this, Warwick.
Yeah.
So
sometimes this is translated when a woman miscarries, meaning the baby died, but it's not saying that in the Hebrew. It's saying life is brought forth in the
Okay.
Hebrew.
So
we're talking
premature birth.
a premature
So if she's injured and she has a premature injury,
Yeah, so then
delivery.
a fine should be paid because a premature baby is more at risk of not surviving.
Well, that's about it. That's about what the Old Testament really says. There's not a whole lot of text. There's texts that talk about life in the womb and about it in poetic forms. But to look for the absolute nitty-gritty, I mean, there's not a whole lot of text, or there's some that say if they look really hard, there are. But the real question I'd like to address now is with Heather, and the question is, can you start again, and how? Can God ever forgive sexual sin?
He forgives all sin, James. And I love this quoting of the prophecy from Isaiah, which is quoted in Matthew chapter 12, verses 18 to 21. And it talks about Jesus, and it's saying, "Here is my servant whom I've chosen, the one I love and whom I delight. I will put my spirit on him and he will proclaim justice." And the bits that I love particularly, it says, "A bruised reed he will not break, and a smouldering wick he will not snuff out." You know, so Jesus has come. It says in his name the nations will put their hope. So although he was the Jewish Messiah, it's not just for Jews, it's for everybody. All nations can find hope in the man who came as God as man, came to shed his own blood, to pay the price. It's just a most gentle and amazing thing.
I guess we could all agree that nobody ever rushes home after an abortion, throws a party and says, "Guess what, guys? I've had an abortion," do they?
No, there's still a silence over this whole topic, and sadly, that means a lot of women are hurt and are not quick to come forward to seek help.
Yeah.